Hi, it's Ian, and welcome back to my 30 days of knife skills. Today is day 21, and I am working with Swiss chard. So this Swiss chard just came out of my garden a few minutes ago, and I washed it. One thing to do that is a good idea if it's this kind of freshness and perhaps it came out of your garden or farmer's market, it's good to check the back to see if there's any little bugs or some other kinds of things. Sometimes you'll find, when I picked it in the garden, I saw a couple little spiders running around, so I wanted to make sure to get that off at least. So that's a good thing to do, is to check something like a leafy green like this, or kale or things like that. It's always good to check the back. It doesn't hurt to soak it in water for a few minutes, which I did here. Sometimes that'll help get them off a little bit more efficiently. So Swiss chard is it's one of my favorite leafy greens. There's a lot of good leafy greens, but this one is kind of right in between the kind of tougher ones of kale and collard greens and the softer side of spinach. So it's kind of right in between. And the stem, if you are unfamiliar, this stem part is quite delicious too, and it definitely does soften with some cooking. And I think the flavor of Swiss chard to me is a balance of sweetness and a little bit of astringency, or maybe it's bitter, I'm not sure, but it does have that. So I don't really tend to eat it raw. I'm sure you can. It's soft enough for the leaf part anyway. But my favorite way is to cut it into chunks and either saute it or blanch the whole thing and then cut it into about 1-inch pieces and then wring that out. So I cut this off just now, but if I was going to blanch it, I might have a big pot of boiling water and just throw this in, blanch for about 3 minutes, and then shock in very cold water until it's completely chilled. Then I will wring out all the water, very common technique you see in Japan for leafy greens like spinach and such. Try to wring out all the water, and then from there you can just store it as is or cut it into about 1-inch lengths. And my favorite way to eat it from that stage is the goma aede, which I've talked about before, where you make a quick dressing with sesame seeds, sugar, shoyu, and a little bit of liquid. So that's probably my most common way of eating this kind of green. Second most common would be to saute it, maybe in olive oil or butter. So in that case, that's what I would be doing here. I would take off the ends. Depending on how it's harvested, sometimes the very bottom is dirty or dried out or old, so you might get rid of that. And then very simply, I think about this length. I think about that length is good for the stem part. So I would cut all of it into this kind of length, throw it in a saucepan or a skillet with some maybe butter, and cook that down. It helps to put the lid on first to get some of the moisture to come out. Cook that down until it's tender, and then I would throw some shoyu on top. Just 3 ingredients. It's delicious. Such a great side dish that way, that you could just eat tons and tons of something like this. Often, though, I will add some sliced garlic and maybe some chili, some sliced dry chili or something like that. It makes it really good. So that's another very common way for me to do this. But so now we're left with the greens part. And if I was sauteing, you could just cut it like this. I think this will break down enough in the saute that it'll be okay. But oftentimes, though, maybe I would take this and half it. So I would maybe be going for a little bit smaller piece like that. So the first step after taking the end off might be to go down and do this. And to save time, I might do that with multiple, like that. And depending on if I wanted to go even smaller, I might go like this, but I think for me this is fine. So from here I will go to that same 1-inch lengths And all this would be ready for sautéing in butter and shoyu, one of the great combinations ever. So otherwise, it's going to be, for me, it's going to be the other blanching technique, where you just blanch very quickly. I don't even bother salting the water, because usually I'll be mixing that chilled, squeezed out greens. After it's cut, I'll be mixing that with some kind of dressing, so I don't even bother with that. Just throw it in a boiling pot of water. It's actually totally fine to do it. I've done it quite a bit in like a 10 or 12-inch skillet with just a few inches of water, because it boils much quicker than a whole pot of water, so it's a quick way to do that. Sometimes I do pasta that way too. It's sort of a cheating way that I think it works just fine. But in that case, if there's less water, it's really helpful to have that lid so that it blanches quickly. But with so little water, the recovery time, you throw this in, the recovery time is pretty quick too. So that's a good tip to try if you're going to blanch. So those are pretty much my only ways to do it. I think it can go into anything, either at this stage, for example, fried rice, or at the stage after wringing it out and it's cold and you cut it into chunks. You could throw that into really literally anything, in a soup right toward the end, so it doesn't overcook, or mix it with a salad, or really there's no limit as to how make a quick egg dish. Really, there's you can use it 1,000 different ways once you have it in that wrung out stage. So that's usually what I'm doing more than anything else. So that's Swiss chard. Very simple, pretty straightforward, and really delicious. One of my favorite greens. So let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next one.